Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Grab your cup of tea or your cup of coffee and come join us. Welcome once again to our virtual Clean Lakes 101 Science Cafe. I'm Marilee Gorman from First Weber Group and a former Clean Lakes Alliance Executive Board member. Along with Johnson Financial Group, the First Weber Foundation is proud to once again sponsor these talks. Joining us are supporting sponsors, National Guardian Life Insurance Company, usually hosting sponsor, the Edgewater, and our production partners, the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and the UW Extension. Just a few quick announcements. First, I want to thank everybody who has renewed their individual friend and their business Lake Partnership donations this year. Lots of wonderful people out there. Thank you. Here is a list of lake partners who have joined and renewed within the last month. First Weber is a proud lake partner, and my husband Kevin and I are friends of Clean Lakes through the 1963 Club at the Yahara Society level. In case you didn't know, the 1963 Club is a recurring donation starting at just $8.63 per month. If you haven't donated to become a friend of Clean Lakes partner, please visit cleanlakesalliance.org/donate. Secondly, the snow is finally melting, which means the water is running into our lakes through our city streets. A quick reminder that our storm sewers actually lead to the lake, and any debris or trash that you see left behind on the streets will wash into the lakes unless you pick it up. So, when you do some spring cleaning in your house, please keep the lakes clean by checking the curbs and gutters in front of your home or business. Now, to tell us a little bit more about today's talk and speaker lineup is Clean Lakes of Alliance founder and executive director, James Ty.
Thank you very much, Marilee, and thank you for your years of service and being an advocate for the lakes. It's crazy to think that tomorrow, March 11th, will be 1 year since we had an in-person event at Clean Lakes Alliance. Last year at this time, it was at the Edgewater Hotel for one of these Yahara Lakes 101. We're excited today to have over 150 people register for this event, so we keep the education going to let more people learn about the lakes. We're lucky today to have 3 experts from Dane County, including the county executive, to join us in an ongoing discussion about lake improvement projects and efforts spearheaded by Dane County. One of the unique things about the county led by Joe Parisi is partnerships. He does believe in bringing people together around an issue. It's done a wonderful job for the lakes, partnering nonprofit organizations, grants, government organizations, farmers, to the like. County executive has also obviously been a great effort for the lakes, ever starting in office 10 years ago. It's those important community projects like Suck the Muck, removing the sediment from the Yahara River watershed, and purchase of new lands such as the Pheasant Branch Conservancy, that the county is always thinking about the lakes in front of his mind. Joining us today is the county executive, Kathy Koontz, the director of Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. Good morning, Kathy. And John Reimer, the assistant director of Dane County Land and Water Resources Department. Good morning, John. Kathy and John will discuss interesting topics with climate change, stormwater management, and future projects and plans, even some of those that are going on today. I'd like to start off the morning giving a warm welcome and hand things off to our county executive, Joe Parisi. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for, as always, your ongoing efforts. And it's great to be able to be here with a couple of our talented staff members whom I'm so proud. You know, one of the challenges we have often when we're giving presentations is that the county is doing so much, we have to condense it all down in order to get the information across. And as you know, to state the obvious, it's been quite a year. The county staff, as well as so many of you on this call, have been dealing with the challenges of the pandemic for 365 days now. And our county employees have certainly been working, pretty much around the clock, 7 days a week, not only dealing with the pandemic, but keeping everything else the county government does moving forward. And so I just want to say how much I appreciate our staff for just their selfless work, moving forward to address not only the pandemic and its ramifications, but all the other important work that we do. So today we're going to talk about two issues that are very much related. We're going to give you an update on our lakes cleanup efforts, and I'm going to speak a little bit, and then John Reimer will take it over with some more details. And then after that, we're going to give you a quick update on our efforts to combat climate change locally with myself and Kathy Koontz from our Office of Energy and Climate Change. And as most folks on this call know, the two issues are very much intertwined and related. When we think of climate change, often folks think about coastal cities or the fires in California. But as we know, we're feeling those impacts right here. And one of the impacts from the changing climate in Dane County and the different kind of weather we're having is the complications it brings to our lakes cleanup efforts because of the heavy rainfalls that we experience much more frequently than we used to. So we're doing our best to take a comprehensive approach to all of the above. So we're going to break it down a little bit. I'm going to start off again by talking a little bit about our lakes efforts, and then John, and then I will talk a little bit with Kathy about our climate change efforts. So, I just want to mention, though, there are two things that make our work possible. And, first and foremost, it's our community. Our community wants us to do this. Our community cares about our lakes and cares about our environment. So as an elected official and as county government, we need that support. And we couldn't do it without our community saying, yeah, this is where we want you to put effort and resources. So I thank you. And again, as we see, every time we hear from our staff, the ideas that they bring forward and the technical know-how that they have among our Dane County staff, it makes us incredibly fortunate and allows us to go forward and come up with some of the projects that I'm going to talk about. So as you know, our issues around our lakes are really caused by excess nutrients, particularly phosphorus. And, we talk a lot about some of those issues. We focus a lot on the North Mendota watershed. And sometimes people ask, well, why are you so focused on Lake Mendota? Well, we do focus on all of the lakes, absolutely, because there are different issues with all of the lakes. But as we know, everything that happens to Lake Mendota, and that's where so much of the phosphorus runoff originates, impacts every single lake, because that's how our lakes empty out: Mendota, Monona, Waubesa, and Kaganza. So Suck the Muck. Most folks are pretty familiar with Suck the Muck now. That is our program that's a few years old, that was developed by our staff and folks from the DNR, looking at the nutrient-laden sediment that exists in streams that feed into our chain of lakes. As you know, we do such good work upstream in partnerships with the farmers, but we've discovered that there's a lot of phosphorus-laden sediment in those streams that continually flows into the lakes. And so our efforts to get rid of that has been dubbed Suck the Muck. Now, we began a few years ago in Dorne Creek with going in and dredging with hydraulic dredge sediment from Dorne Creek. That project, we removed 11,000 tons of sediment. And within that sediment was 75,000 pounds of phosphorus. And as I'm sure a lot of folks on this call know, 1 pound of phosphorus dissolved in the water can result in 500 pounds of algae. So when we can go in over a couple month period and remove 75,000 pounds of phosphorus from a stream, that's a big deal. And that's the kind of work we need to be doing to get to where we need to be with the lakes. Last year, we were on the other side of the county, we were at Token Creek, and we removed 20,000 tons of sediment. And within that sediment was 90,000 pounds of phosphorus. And again, when we do this, not only are we removing the phosphorus, but we're also restoring those streams to a near pristine condition. So we're improving biodiversity, we're providing for fish habitat, et cetera. So this year we'll be going to 6 Mile Creek for the next phase, and John will talk a little bit about that. As you know, another part of our initiatives involve manure digesters. We have our 2 manure digesters, one outside of Middleton, one outside of Wanakee. And we've got some interesting things going on with those. Our digester in the town of Springfield recently was the site of a new investment of Dane County into something called a nutrient concentration system. And when we use the digestion process, what happens is the manure goes through a process that removes about 60% of the phosphorus. And then there's an anaerobic digestion process that creates and takes out the methane gas from the manure. And so that's good for 2 reasons. It's taking that methane out while we're processing the manure to clean our lakes, but then we're also getting rid of a very potent greenhouse gas. And so I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to mention the nutrient concentration system first. So when we go through that process, there's still about 40% of the original phosphorus left in one of the byproducts, which looks almost like tea. They call it tea water. This nutrient concentration system takes that water, it goes through a reverse osmosis process, and it removes the remaining phosphorus from that water. So in essence, we achieve 100% phosphorus reduction from this process. So we're very excited about the results at that digester with nutrient concentration and what that means for the future. So back to the methane gas for a minute. So what we've done in the past, the original design of the digesters, was take that methane gas and use it to generate renewable electricity, which was a great use for it. It destroyed that methane, so again, got rid of those greenhouse gases, and it produced baseload renewable energy. Under that model, the economic model for the digesters, there's a very thin margin. They would just get by economically, but it wasn't easy. And with the rise of solar and wind and those prices coming down, we were no longer cost competitive with those dollars to generate electricity. So we started looking for other solutions. And at the same time, we had the same issue at our landfill, because as you may know, we were extracting methane from our landfill and generating electricity there. But we were facing the same thing where we weren't going to be able to get the money for the electricity that we needed. So the county invested over $26 million to create a facility at the landfill that would further extract, clean, and compress the methane gas to a point where it was suitable for transportation fuel. So it is the cleanest, greenest transportation fuel available. So, you know, that banana peel you threw away ends up in the landfill, and we turn it into compressed natural gas. We use it to fill up our trucks and county vehicles that run on CNG, and then we sell the rest of it to Quick Trip. So a local Wisconsin company that sells it as transportation fuel. And the economics of that are much better than they are for generating electricity. And the greenhouse gas offset is actually even more. So with that model, that's a very economically sustainable. Once our investment at the landfill is paid off, we will be bringing in a few $1 million a year profit for the county. So what we did, we created an offloading station at the landfill so that our digesters, if they chose, could decide to use their gas and compress it as natural gas and take advantage of those same economics. And that's the direction they're going in now. So we're really excited about the future of digesters because of the access to this new resource of being able to sell compressed natural gas. I'll mention a couple of quick things before I turn it over to John. As James mentioned, we also look at runoff when it comes to, and how we're using our lands when it comes to both looking at catching sediment and slowing down the rain when it hits, both for cleaning up our lakes and for reducing flooding. So we had a very important purchase last year in Pheasant Branch, 160 acres that we are converting back to prairie that is right at the Pheasant Branch Creek and goes right into Lake Mendota. And that's going to be huge in our efforts to clean up the lakes as well as slow down floodwaters. Another program we have in partnership with our local farmers has been very popular. It's called Continuous Cover. And so it's a grant program that's available to our local farmers who are interested in changing their row cropping to rotational grazing or prairies or perennial grasses that are harvestable. And we have had great interest in this program. This year we upped the grant the total amount available in the grant fund to $1.75 million. And as people convert these lands that might be lands that they didn't necessarily, want to be, having row cropping for various reasons in the first place, now the economics are there that allow them to do this. This is helping our farmers, and it's helping our lakes by providing more continuous cover on those lands. One other thing that you may have noticed going on this summer is a big dredging project that was visible when you went over the Beltline over by Mud Lake. When it comes to flooding, one of our challenges has been, we saw this a few years ago with these new rain events. The rain comes down so hard, all the water goes in, especially into Lake Mendota. And there's more water coming in Lake Mendota than the system has the ability to empty out in time. And this is because of over the years, sediment has developed between the channels, between the lakes, and the lakes just can't empty out. So we have begun a project where we are dredging the channels in between each lake over the next 4 years. This year we contracted it out and we were able to get the work done between Monona and Wabisa. But then we've also now invested in our own equipment and staff so that moving forward, we have better control over timing and where and when we go to do this dredging. And so what this will result in over the next few years is our ability to much better empty out our lakes once we have these heavy rains, and there will be a reduction in flooding. So I think I'm going to stop there and hand it off to John, and then we will come back when John's done and talk a little bit about climate change. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Executive Joe Parisi. I'm John Reimer with Dane County Land and Water Resource Department. And today I'm going to echo a lot what the executive talked about. And what I have for you today is a lot of the pictures that go along with that. And let's get right into it. So specifically what I want to talk about and share with you today is water quantity and quality for the Yahara chain of lakes. And when we talk about quantity, we're talking about water levels and the amount of water, which in the end we know causes economic damage and loss. The other perspective of water coming into our lakes is the quality that it contains. And that can contain, runoff from farm fields, from urban areas, and that can bring in nutrients and different contaminants, E. coli, bacteria, and ultimately that can cause beach closings and create unsafe water for people swimming and recreating in our water, as well as aquatic life concerns. So what I have for you is a lot of several things, and I'm going to go through these quickly. I think each item that I have can be its own talk, but I wanted to give an overall background and kind of take you on a journey on the water flow that flows through our system and some of the actions that the county's been working on. So first of all, when we think about water flow through our system, here's Dane County, here's our lakes. Right, and obviously, as we know, when it rains, that water can either infiltrate into the ground, which is great in certain areas. If we have basements with groundwater issues, that may not be very, very good for those homes. But as we know, the water that doesn't infiltrate, that runs off. And this is what we call quantity. The amount of water that runs off, that's what affects our lakes in terms of high water levels and flooding.
Hey, John, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're not seeing your slides on the screen. Do you mind sharing those slides?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
Huh. Luke, I am okay. Can you see can you see it now? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Well, then I'll continue here. Instead of going back to some of the slides because of my limited time here, want to talk about water flow in the Yahara Lake. So when we think about that, I'll repeat this slide at least. We think about rainfall. It occurs on the landscape. That water infiltrates, can affect our groundwater, and what doesn't infiltrate runs off, right? And that runoff, brings in the amount of water as well as the quality. Does it contain nutrients? What comes into our lakes? So from the county in the actions that we've done, many actions have been implemented. I'm going to share with you a few. And as the executive mentioned, our Harvestable Buffer Program, we started this in 2014. And what this is near farm fields or specifically near edges of water. What we established with that farmer is a 15-year contract with a minimum harvestable buffer width of 30 feet. And this prevents the nutrients and as well as infiltrating water from coming into our waterways. And this has been a pretty successful program. We have over 100 acres within that program. Another program called our Continuous Cover Program. This has started in 2019. So this is relatively recent. Again, we're looking for long-term, making long-term contributions to reducing the runoff. And these again are 15-year contracts. And what this is converting agricultural land to a perennial cover. So what that does is reduce the amount of contact of soil and water by having this permanent cover, allowing infiltration. And that permanent cover can be three things. Either it could be cool season grasses, native prairie, or a grazing mix. And this has been, as I mentioned, very successful. Over 1,200 acres have been implemented through this program. So as I kind of move on, another item on the runoff reduction programs is our manure digesters. There's 2 digesters, and to put in terms of the amount of manure that these treat, Wanakee is 35 million gallons per year. The Middleton digester is 26 million gallons per year. So the unique thing about the digesters is they allow manure to come in from as a community system to allow us to separate the solids, which contain phosphorus, and allow us to redistribute those in the watershed or areas where they need those nutrients and prevent them from runoff. Another component, as the executive mentioned, is the nutrient concentration system. So we have the solids and then there's the liquids. The liquid portion in the digesters now can run through what we call the nutrient concentration system using treatment technology, ultrafiltration, and remote osmosis, which can treat about 100,000 gallons per day. And what that ends up to be is, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, those bottles represent the different streams of water. So the far left, we see that kind of very dark looking water. And at the end of the treatment, we get that clear looking water, and that's what then can be discharged to the stream. So we clean up all the water, and then that way we can concentrate these nutrients. And again, the farmer can apply it in the time that we're less sensitive, for example, rainfall, and target where we want those nutrients to be spread on the landscape. Okay, another item I wanted to mention was the Pheasant branch and land restoration efforts. The county has been very proactive to purchase lands that we can restore and reduce the amount of nutrients and runoff entering our lakes. I won't go into too much details. I think we had a Yahara 101 discussion on this, or talk on this as well. But what I wanted to say here is I wanted to thank our partners on this project, Pheasant, the Friends of Pheasant Branch, the Nature Conservancy, and the Clean Lakes Alliance for all their support and donations and funding to really come together on this project to make it successful. So if we keep kind of moving on, water then goes from the runoff, then we go into our streams. And what have we been working on in our streams? This is what executive mentioned, our Suck the Muck. So a lot of times, we think about our land and our water that comes in, when that water comes in and it's this green color, it contains nutrients, comes from runoff, and we implement our practices. We want to reduce the amount of load that's coming in by our cover crops, buffer strips, manure practices, right? And our goal here is to reduce the amount of load, right? And what that means is that this water here becomes blue. But actually what we're seeing is the water is green. And why is that? This is what we call legacy phosphorus effect. There's already phosphorus stored in our system that continuously leaches out and causes water quality problems. So our first project was on Dorne Creek. And what we wanted to do is a little bit more than just phosphorus removal. It was really restoring the hydrology in this area. And what we did is reconnect the floodplain or the wetland here to the stream. Before it was short-circuiting around this wetland. So not only did we remove the phosphorus, but we wanted to reconnect this wetland to provide additional ecosystem services. As well as create a fish spawning area as well for northern pike that come up into this area. So, you know, the dredging was by hydraulic all the way through this section between Highway Q and M, about 2.5 miles. And in the end, we see a lot of benefits on not only on the phosphorus, but on different aquatic life, such as turtles and fish. So here's an example what it looked like before. We see this short-circuiting channel around our wetland complex. And after, this is what we restored it to. We brought it back to its original path, this meandering path line, so we can reconnect the wetland to the floodplain. And here's a picture showing that work being done. So in terms of the outcomes, what we see is we continuously monitor this. We want to confirm that what we're doing is we're making the benefits, and we adapt. If there's things we need to change, we look at that through data. So if we look at the data from 2013 to 2019, what we see is the purple, which is upstream, is always less in terms of the amount of phosphorus than downstream. So in other words, we have more phosphorus leaving the system that's entering, right? All these years, except when we get to 2019, after our dredging, what we actually see is a decline in the amount of phosphorus loading that's entering the lakes because of what we did here to restore the hydrologic connectivity and remove all that phosphorus in the stream. We can also look at it from a concentration perspective, and instead of getting all the details, we can look at the annual growing season, different seasons, and what we see in 2019 is a dramatic decline in the amount of phosphorus that's leaving the system. Okay, the other component I want to share with you very quickly is on the water quantity. So when we look at the water quantity in 2016, for example, there was 2.5 times more volume leaving the system than entering. And today what we see is 1.2 times. So in other words, we cut the amount of water volume that's entering Lake Mendota in terms of the storm flows by about half. So significantly amount of reduction, not only in terms of phosphorus, but on water quantity. All right. So as we kind of keep moving through, right, water moves into our lakes, and we see that nutrient kind of moving through our lakes. And what are the efforts that we've been doing in the lake? So I'll share with you one, which is beach closings. So, and if people are familiar with this, this is our beach treatment system, which goes in the water, prevents offshore contamination of water. And then inside, we treat the water to provide safe swimming recreation for people to enjoy our lakes. And I won't go too much into the details, but really this is a design that we came up with that treats the water by bringing the water into different technologies. One is a strainer. Next, it goes to a sand filter. We remove all the algae and bigger particles. Then the water continues to move forward and goes into what we call a UV disinfection. And this kills disinfects all the pathogens, bacteria. And from there, we return the water all back into the swimming water. And this system is a smart system. It's all automated. So when our sand filters get clogged, the system reverses and cleans all that out, all automated. So it continuously runs 24/7 to provide safe, clean water for people. So as part of all our work, we always want to monitor and see the outcomes. And what we see from algae, orders of magnitude much larger outside than inside, and it's shown to be very effective for reducing the amount of algae. And these are just different species. Slindospermopsis is the top one, and these are pretty common different algae species. Okay, here's some pictures that we show of Mendota County Beach. This is in July. Interestingly, you don't see any contamination here, but on this day we were sampling, there was high E. coli bacteria levels outside versus inside non-detectable. So what we see is there's times where we have pathogens of bacteria, we can't see them. And this is provide the safe water. On the bottom here picture shows algae. You see this paint-like look on the surface on the outside. Inside, we don't see that. We see this cleaner type water, or this not that algae on top. In partnership with the City of Madison, we're looking to expand to 5 additional beaches, starting with next year, Warner Beach in 2021. All right, so as the water kind of moves from our streams into our lakes, right, that causes what we, if we have a lot, flooding. And as we know, our precipitation is increasing, our lake levels are increasing, and this is looking at the historical data. And ultimately what we're looking to do is, how do we improve our flood resiliency? And what we want to do is provide a situation where if the flood disaster does come, we can recover quickly. We know what we need to do in those actions. And after 2018, a technical work group was convened, provided that information to a policy task force, and there was this feedback loop about what should we do. And there was different options we looked at on the adaptation, change lake levels, in terms of different strategies, remove the dams. You know, maybe that's not ideal for some, or some it is. Mitigation, adjust bridges, do sediment removal, pumping. And what we found was that there was a large support for sediment removal. And that's the actions we're implementing right now. We've developed a 5-phase plan. We've completed phase 1 between Lake Monona, Lake Wabeesa. We're hoping to start phase 2 this year, which is between Wabeesa, Lower Mud Lake, and Lake Kaganza to Highway B. In addition to that, as Executive Parisi mentioned, the county invested in our own dredge. So here, with this just got delivered about 2 weeks ago. And here's our dredge being delivered, and our crew is coming on board very shortly, where we're going to have our own Dane County crew so we can move as efficiently and as quickly as we can to move these projects forward. So at the end, I just wanted to conclude that, you know, I wanted to take you on this journey as water moves through our system. You know, we look at all aspects of land and water. In particular, what we think about is, how do we provide these actions that are sustainable? Provide those to meet our social needs, environmental needs, and economic needs. And altogether, these are what we call sustainability. And today, what I talked to you about is our land and water actions. But there's other components, and that is our climate drivers, our rainfall and our temperature. And I'm going to hand it over now back to Executive Parisi on actions that could be done on our climate and our resiliency for climate. So thank you.
John, thank you so much. You know, as I mentioned, folks, earlier, you can see how blessed we are in this community to have the people who are out there like John and his team making all this happen. This gives you just a glimpse about how many projects and how complex they are. And that John and his team, I mean, John's modest, that they developed the technology for many of the projects that you've been seeing. And you know, I just couldn't be more proud of the folks we work with. As John mentioned, and as I alluded to a little bit earlier, the manner in which the climate is changing has changed the formula for what we're dealing with, because we know if the root cause of our challenges is runoff, and our climate is changing in the way it is, and that we have these heavy sustained rains, that changes everything. So while we are working on the projects that John just outlined, and will continue to, it's even more critical now with that change, we feel it's also important that we do our part up front to reduce our emissions and countywide emissions of the greenhouse gases that are at the root cause of this challenge too. You know, and sometimes people say, well, what can a county do? What can a local community do? And my response to that is everything. And that's where it has to happen. We need help from the federal government. We need help from the state government, but the boots on the ground piece happens locally. It has to do with implementing projects and getting those reductions, not only in our own organizations, but coming together as a community in order to do so. So briefly, before I turn it over to Kathy, I'll just give you a little overview of our approach to climate change. In addition to all the mitigation efforts that we're doing to deal with the impacts of climate change, we've decided to look first internally into county government and our functions. Over the past few years, we have invested millions of dollars in internal energy efficiency programs within county government. And as folks probably know, energy efficiency is the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to return on investment. So it's a very fiscally responsible method, and it also does a great job because, unfortunately, especially in buildings that already exist, there's a lot of room for improvement. I would urge everyone on this call to look into your homes, look into your businesses, your places of worship, et cetera, for ways that you can invest in energy efficiency and renewables. So we have invested in energy efficiency. And while we were doing that, we assessed all of the county government facilities, not only for efficiency, but for the ability to accept renewable power. And to date, we have about 17 solar arrays on county facilities throughout Dane County. Two of our larger and more exciting partnerships are with our local utilities. So out at the airport, we identified over about 60 acres of land that was suitable for solar. And we approached MG&E about a partnership. And so the result of that partnership is that MG&E developed a solar field, about a 9 megawatt, that's over 35,000 solar panels. And they paid the upfront cost, so there was no out-of-pocket cost for taxpayers. In exchange, we promised to buy all of that electricity from them. And because of the cost effectiveness of renewable energy, the MG&E was able to offer us that clean energy at a reduced rate. So when we flipped the switch on that earlier this year, we are now offsetting 40% of county government's electricity use with that solar energy, and it's reduced our overall energy bill by about $140,000 in the first year. So again, that's an example of the opportunities that are out there to save money, whether you're a unit of local government, a homeowner, or a business. And there are a lot of really interesting financing options, by the way, available for businesses where you can do the same kind of thing and realize a reduction in your bills for no out of money expense. So as we look to offset 100% of our electricity, we've looked at all of our efforts that we've done in our facilities and with this project, and we needed one more large project. So we've partnered with Alliant Energy on a project that we're in the beginning stages of over by our landfill on some land we bought, and we will be developing, Alliant Energy Center will be developing on our property a solar field that's about double the size of the one that we have with MG&E. And once that's complete, we will have a 100% renewable offset of all of the electricity that Dane County government uses. In addition to that, earlier I mentioned our efforts with renewable natural gas, with renewable compressed gas out at the landfill. Again, that goes a huge way towards offsetting our electricity, over half, or excuse me, our greenhouse gas emissions. So over half of our highway trucks now run on renewable compressed natural gas. So you see the big trucks that are plowing snow, that are fixing our highways. As they come up, when it's time to replace them, we replace them with CNG vehicles. So instead of burning dirty diesel fuel, they're burning clean CNG, and it costs us about $1.40 a gallon. So again, we're offsetting climate greenhouse gas, and we're saving important dollars at that. So as we look internally and continue to do everything we can to clean up Dane County government's emissions, we realize that we're in a good position to facilitate the community coming together to help people with technology and understanding of how we can go countywide to offset greenhouse gases. So a couple of years ago, I created something called the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. And in that office, we embarked on a project to put together what we refer to as a climate action plan. And Kathy will be presenting some more details of that in a minute. But basically what we did, we brought people together from across the county to develop a plan to offset a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions across industry, our local governments, schools, businesses, transportation, et cetera. And this isn't kind of a top-down regulation. This is what the federal or state government's telling us we have to do. We don't have that kind of authority, but we do have the ability to create partnerships because people want to do this. But sometimes it's the technical know-how. How do we get from point A to point B. And just as we've seen in our lakes cleanup partnerships with our farmers, our communities, with the sewerage district, people can come together and make significant change that changes our culture. It changes the way we do business, and it doesn't depend on the swing of the partisan pendulum that we go through to have something put in place and then have it undone after the next election. This is something we're all choosing to do as a community and making a difference, not only for us, but for our kids and for our grandchildren and future generations. So I'm really excited to introduce Kathy Koontz, who is our director of the Office of Energy and Climate Change. And she's been leading the charge in our work to put forward, to educate people about the Climate Action Plan and to enlist people to work with us. We're really looking at this almost like a community organizing scenario, because we need everyone to come together to spread the news about how people can transition to renewables and help reduce greenhouse gases and save money for their businesses and the residents and their local governments. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and she's going to present on the Climate Action Plan, and then we're all happy to take questions if time allows about either presentation. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, County Executive. I'll just share my screen there. And it's terrific to be with all of you today to talk a little bit about the Climate Action Plan, and especially how the Climate Action Plan ties to our commitment to clean lakes. As the County Executive said, our action plan really started with this Council on Climate Change, a really diverse group of government, business, environmental groups, farmers, social justice folks coming together to create a climate action plan. And there are two broad things you should know about our climate action plan. It's pragmatic and it's visionary. It's pragmatic because the county exec really insisted on that. At the very first meeting of the council, he told them to focus on the art of the possible. What can we do in Dane County to get it done? You can tell when he talks, he likes results. So there's a pragmatism here. There's also, though, a vision. The council really recognized that when we're reducing emissions, we have an opportunity to build back better. We talk about that a lot now in our post-COVID world, but we were talking about that tied to emissions. And that means that we're going to address equity and justice. We're going to deliver economic health and ecosystem benefits. We're going to, which includes clean lakes. We're going to be more resilient, and we're going to bridge the rural-urban divide while we accomplish this climate action plan. So whenever you do a plan like this, it's a good thing to know where you're starting. In Dane County, we start our 2016 baseline. We produced about 7.5 million metric tons of carbon in Dane County. And the pie chart gives you a sense of the magnitude of those emissions. So electricity is the biggest piece of our emissions in Dane County. In Wisconsin, we get most of our electricity from coal and natural gas. Our electricity relative to national data is still somewhat dirty. The two yellowish pieces here, residential and commercial, that's the natural gas we use in our buildings to heat space and water. So about half of our emissions are about our built environment. And then a little bit more than half of the remainder is the transportation sector. So that just sort of gives you an order of magnitude about all of this. The way the plan came together, Keith Riopel was the first director of our office and did this magnificent job bringing people together in about a dozen subject matter working groups to identify recommendations that went through the council on what we can do, tangible things we can do to reduce our emissions. And I don't have time to talk about all 100 recommendations. Check out the CAP to learn more about that. I'm going to give you sort of a scheme to understand them. So on most of the plan is about how we reduce our emissions. And there are three big buckets of things to do. And the first is about eliminating waste. And that's certainly energy efficiency, but it's also food waste and water waste, because anytime we move a resource around and process it and then at the end waste it, that's emissions we don't need to emit. The second big category is transitioning from fossil fuels to clean energy sources. So that's getting our electricity from solar and wind. That's getting the RNG we still use from the landfill and manure digesters. And then the final piece is to use that clean energy to fully electrify our buildings, to transition our vehicles to electric and natural gas. There's another piece though of our strategy, and that's about increasing natural carbon sequestration. And it's why the things John talked about earlier coincide with the things I'm talking about, because a number of the activities that our land and water resources folks are doing, like the continuous cover crops, help us store more carbon in the ground. So their efforts are helping us have more perennials and forests that help store carbon. So all of that helps too with our carbon action, with our climate action plan. Again, there's 100 recommendations here. Part of what we really needed to understand was, how do these recommendations move us forward? So the first thing that happened was the work groups each identified very clear time-sensitive outcomes. If we do all the recommendations you're making, what happens? And let's just use an example. The exec talked about solar. So our outcome for solar is we want 1,200 megawatts installed by 2030. In 2016, when we started, we had less than 12 megawatts installed in the county. Last year, we doubled the amount of solar in the county. So these are, I want you to have the sense that these goals are very ambitious, but they're also achievable. More, they're significant, because it turns out when we look at those goals versus so we started with 7.5 million metric tons of carbon. If we hit all of those goals by 2030, we will cut our emissions in half, which is what the climate experts are telling us we need to do to be on track. So that means we have a really good plan. This is the right plan, but it's a plan. What's important is what we do with the plan. And so the priorities right now for us are events like this, engaging people, making people aware that we have a plan and that there's a role for them to play in that plan. It's also really important for my office to be making it as easy as possible for folks to reduce their emissions and to celebrate the leadership we're seeing out there. And I'll talk a bit more about that, in addition to reporting on progress. I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples and then we'll throw it open for questions. So one of the ways we're making it easier is the county exec worked with Madison's mayor to create the Sustainability Leaders Collaborative. This is a collaborative across the cities, towns, and villages in Dane County. We also recently added the school districts. And the idea is to bring folks together to learn from each other, to accelerate clean energy, to help folks procure solar energy for their facilities, et cetera. The photo there is from an event we did last summer with fleet folks. So they got to kick the tires of some of the city of Madison's electric vehicles and our RNG snow plows, and it helped local governments learn more about those technologies and move further forward. Another example of a way we're eliminating barriers is property assessed clean energy financing. The executive alluded to this. So business owners, but also nonprofits who own their own facilities, have access to financing for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects that's cash positive. And by that I mean the savings from the project. Look at my little example there. Your project might save $600 a month. Your loan payment would be $450 a month. So doing the project actually puts more cash in your pocket on a monthly basis. And we're doing a lot to increase awareness of programs like this that help folks move faster forward. Recognition is an incredibly important part of what we do. There are lots of organizations in Dane County that are leading on some aspect of climate, whether that's being in a really energy efficient building, whether that's their fleet practices or striving for zero waste. And so we created a Climate Champions program in 2020 to recognize those achievements. And I'm happy to say we recognized dozens of folks last year, our first year of the program. We're now accepting applications for 2021. My goal is to at least double our climate champions this year. And so certainly I hope you will take a look at that. And then finally, my invitation to all of you is to think about how you can be a climate ally for us. You know, there are really simple things to do, like setting an example in your own life, encouraging others to take action, talking to your organization about, hey, we're doing things around energy efficiency, maybe we should apply to be a climate champion. We're also aiming to partner with, you know, we've created some partnerships with the faith community. We're working with some workplace green teams. We really want to help folks leverage change in their environments in whatever way we can. And then finally, definitely help us celebrate climate leadership. Check out, we have these fun interactive maps of climate champions. A business that you work with, let them know that you think it's pretty cool that they've done this, because every time we all come together around that, we move these goals forward in the ways that we need to get to the next place. So with that, I will say thank you, and I will stop sharing so we can do some questions.
All right, thanks, Kathy. Thanks, County Executive and John. We have a host of questions here, so I'm gonna get right to it. And both Kathy and John and maybe Joe will want to answer these, and I'm just going to try to go through the list here. We had somebody ask if you all have set goals for enrollment of the land and the buffer and cover crop programs, and if you have goals, what are they, and what can be done to increase participation in those programs?
Yeah, so in terms of the goals in our, I mean, right now we have a lot of interest in that program. We probably have more oversubscribed right now than that we can handle with our staff. We're doing as many as we can, and as I mentioned, for the not the cover crops but the continuous cover program, over 1,200 acres just in 2 years. So yeah, we're continuing to ramp this up, learning more, and it's a pretty successful program so far. People now at this point are coming to us. So that's great to see that people are interested in this program and getting on our list to be part of it.
Great.
Yeah, and with, oh, I'm sorry, and with the
No,
continuous
go ahead.
thanks. With the continuous cover, we're still assessing the, you know, because we just piloted this, started it a few years ago. We weren't even sure how much interest there would be. And so we're kind of assessing what the potential is. And right now, as John said, the only limit on that is our staff time and the amount we can invest as a county. So it's really exciting to see how many people want to participate. And I think if you look at everything from programs like that to some of the things Kathy was talking about, really our goal is to help people do what they already want to do. Because people in this community want to make change, whether it's, you know, working on their land or implementing efficiency and renewables. And that's what's so exciting. We don't have to convince people. Our role is to help them accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish. And that's a much nicer place to be in than having to try to convince people that these things are important. So it's a great reflection of our community.
Great. Thank you very much. Great answer. A good question, and I don't know that I necessarily know the answer. And so, John, maybe you have it, or County Executive. We mentioned removing sediment from the Yahara decreases the duration of flooding here. Does it increase flooding downstream? Like are folks in Janesville and Beloit, do they have to make any, are we pushing more water through the system? And it seems like a very elementary question, but I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, so in terms of the amount of water going downstream, I mean, when we look downstream at the Rock River, they're an order of magnitude larger than us. So what we're talking about is increasing the flow, not necessarily by thousands of CFS, but by hundreds of CFS, and also in the timing that we can move it forward quicker. So if we get a storm tomorrow, we can move it out tomorrow versus waiting 5-10 days for that flow to really ramp up, because our system is so slow and sluggish that we can't get it out in time. But can we get it out more quicker in time? So yeah, I mean, we're going to increase flow downstream, but not dramatically, not to what they see for flow down there.
Sort of a question maybe tied to that. Someone was wondering, with a lot of the dredging projects, especially in upper mud area there, will that help lake levels go back to those summer max and summer min operating levels that we may have seen a few years prior versus the levels it's been at now?
Yeah, that's the goal with the sediment removal is to be able to be within those summer targets more often than above. I mean, even if we get a normal rainfall, statistically, we're above the summer max. Even under a normal year of rainfall, we'll be above summer max for the majority of the summer.
Great. Somebody else had an interesting question mentioning or wondering if there's any plans or innovative ideas to improve some of those large tributaries that go into Lake Monona, Starkweather specifically. Wondering, it's a project that could greatly affect the rest of the chain, targeting some of those tributaries. I'm just curious what the county has to say about that.
Yeah, for some of the more urban areas like Starkweather, I didn't mention it, but the county has a program called the Urban Water Quality Grant, and that provides funding to municipalities within those urban areas to implement practices such as doing things in Starkweather Creek. For the city of Madison, for example, city of Monona has applied for several of our grants as well. So we do have that grant program available for those municipalities.
Got it. I think I know the answer. Actually, I'm fairly certain I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to let you answer it. Someone was asking a question about the beach cleaning systems and wondering if they're permanent fixtures, and if so, are they continually cleaning the water? I'm pretty certain they're permanent fixtures. And can you just kind of explain that just a smidge more at a high level?
Yeah, so the permanent features would be the pump and the building that's there. That stays there year round. We winterize it in the wintertime, right? And then the curtain that's in the water gets put in every year because of ice could damage it. So we take in and out that piece.
Okay, yeah, good. Somebody asked a question about the digesters. With everything being done to strategically capture the phosphorus, is there a way to use it to meet farmer fertilizer needs to reduce commercial phosphorus fertilizers? And I think for the most part, we don't, even our agriculture doesn't use phosphorus fertilizers here in Dane County. But I just want to, and this is from Dick Lathrop, who's a foremost expert on the subject. So I'm kind of curious. He said, strategically use that recycled phosphorus to meet farmer fertilizer needs as a way to reduce the importing of commercial phosphorus fertilizers and reduce watershed soil phosphorus levels.
Yeah, that's a good question. With the farms that are part of the digester, they all need to have a nutrient management plan. So that nutrient management plan determines how much phosphorus and nutrients they can spread on their land for the crops. But there's another perspective again on outside those farms and what can we do with those nutrients to benefit the farms. And I didn't put it in the slide here, but we're looking into community manure composting. How can we bring this to a central facility and provide a resource for many farmers to bring it and use it in areas where it's needed?
Another good question here, and at Clean Lakes Alliance, we of course focus on the Yahara River watershed. So we really want to know everything that's being done there. But somebody asked, is Dane County working in areas outside the Yahara chain? As I sit here in Verona, I believe I'm in the upper Sugar River watershed. So it's a good question. Just curious what the county is doing outside the Yahara chain.
Yeah, our programs are county-wide. So what I talked to you today about are county-wide programs. In the Yahara, they've been very successful, but they are nonetheless county-wide programs. And in the Yahara lakes are what we call warm water streams. So once we get to the western Dane County, we get to cold water streams. And in our initiatives or our practices in the stream may be a little bit different for preventing warm water from entering and try and protect the trout and those species in the streams.
I'm going to try to sneak in just a couple more here. Someone wanted to know when Nine Springs will restore its natural course of flow.
That question, I'm not sure I'm aware of the natural course of flow. Much of that is within, or some of that's within the urban area, and it's already built up. But yeah, I can maybe follow up.
I'm going to try to get one more here. Someone asked, said the bar chart showing phosphorus lows in the streams versus entering the lake. It looked like overall phosphorus levels were higher the last few years, even though the portion entering the lake was lower. why was the overall amount higher than usual?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is related to a lot of the work that Kathy's doing on climate change. The driver of higher loads coming in is because of rainfall and the amount of water we having in. So doing the actions that Kathy talked about to reduce or prevent are these intense storms and climate will reduce the amount of water that's coming in. So
great. Well, being respectful of everybody's time, we are at 9 o'clock. I want to, of course, thank County Executive Joe Parisi again, John Reimer, and Kathy Koontz for joining us. Fantastic talk. We're always so happy to hear everything the county is doing, and it's really exciting, especially now that it's warming up again and things are thawing, and we're going to start to see flowing water here again soon. Real quickly before we go, just a reminder: with everything thawing, if you have time today, maybe before it rains, try to get out and clean maybe in front of your home or where you're living, or if you're at a business, because anything that is in the street will eventually make it into our storm sewers and into the lakes. And so it's a real big help to pick up any debris you see, maybe even recapture any salt that you see there. It can be stored in a bucket and used again. And some of these small actions that we can all do that may only take, half an hour, an hour, will actually, if we do them collectively, will make a real big difference to the lakes, in the months down the road. So if you have time to maybe do a little spring cleaning around your home or your business, that would be great. We're looking to have our next Clean Lakes 101 talk on Wednesday, April 14th. Watch your inboxes for information on that. We'll hear from some fantastic experts on the state of science and kind of where we are with the Yahara Clean Compact, which is this just fantastic roadmap and consortium of 19 collaborators, including Dane County, of course, on how we're going to maybe take the next steps towards addressing some of those climate change issues and what we can do to keep the lakes clean and healthy. Thanks again to everybody so much for joining us, and have a great morning.